The divine deception. The Kirathi Empire had maintained their divine charade for over 5,000 years. From their crystalline throne world of Axiom Prime, they projected an image of omnipotence across 47 star systems. Their ships appeared as living constellations. Their bodies radiated with bioluminescent patterns that shifted like aurora displays, and their voices could penetrate the minds of lesser beings without sound. To the countless species under their rule, the Kirathi were not merely advanced aliens. They were the Eternal Ones, the Star Weavers, the gods of the void. High Priest Zelthar stood in the Chamber of Infinite Sight, watching holographic displays of tribute ships arriving from their subject worlds. Each vessel carried precious resources, rare minerals, and most importantly, the unwavering faith of billions who believed the Kirathi controlled the very fabric of existence. The truth was far more mundane. The Kirathi had simply discovered ancient technology left behind by a truly advanced civilization that had vanished eons ago. They reverse-engineered what they could, understanding perhaps 20% of the original designs. But it was enough to fool younger species who had barely mastered interstellar travel. Their ships used gravitational lensing to appear larger and more ethereal than they actually were. Their bioluminescence came from genetically modified organisms integrated into their ceremonial armor. Their telepathic communication was nothing more than focused electromagnetic pulses directed at specific neural pathways, a crude form of technological mind-speaking that required extensive preparation and only worked on species they had studied for decades. The entire empire was built on smoke and mirrors, but it had worked flawlessly for millennia. No species had ever questioned their divinity, for the simple reason that questioning gods was unthinkable to those who truly believed. On the edge of Kirathi space, a human exploration vessel emerged from hyperspace. The UNS Pioneer was not a warship, but a long-range scientific vessel, equipped with advanced sensors and a crew of 300 researchers, engineers, and diplomatic personnel. Captain Marcus Riley stood on the bridge, reviewing the data from their latest jump. They had been mapping this sector for 6 months, following ancient gravitational anomalies that suggested the presence of advanced technology. What they found instead was an empire built on fear and false worship. The first sign something was wrong came when their communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, intercepted transmissions from nearby systems. The messages spoke of divine tributes, sacred offerings, and punishment for those who failed to properly worship the Eternal Ones. Riley had seen enough human history to recognize religious exploitation when he encountered it. Earth's past was filled with false prophets and manufactured miracles used to control populations. The captain ordered the Pioneer to maintain silent running while they gathered more intelligence. For 3 days they observed from the edge of the system, using passive sensors to avoid detection. They watched massive ships that seemed to shimmer and change shape, but their quantum analyzers revealed the truth. The visual distortions were caused by precisely calibrated gravity fields, creating optical illusions on a massive scale. They detected the electromagnetic signatures of the supposed telepathic communications, recognizing them as targeted neural manipulation rather than true psychic abilities. Everything about the Kirathi screamed advanced technology, masquerading as divine power. The decision to reveal themselves was not taken lightly. Riley consulted with his senior staff, including Chief Science Officer Dr. Amanda Foster and Head of Cultural Studies Professor Chen Wei. They agreed that first contact was inevitable, and it was better to control the circumstances than be discovered accidentally. The Pioneer transmitted a standard greeting on multiple frequencies, announcing their peaceful intentions and desire for dialogue. The response was immediate and dramatic. Space itself seemed to tear open as 3 Kirathi vessels materialized around the Pioneer. They appeared as massive serpents of light, coiling through the void with impossible grace. A voice resonated through the human ship, bypassing their communication systems entirely. Every crew member heard it in their mind, speaking in perfect English despite the impossibility of the Kirathi knowing their language. The voice proclaimed the arrival of divine judgment, demanding the humans prostrate themselves before their gods or face eternal damnation. Riley felt the pressure in his skull as the message repeated, trying to overwhelm his rational thought with manufactured awe. But humans had something the Kirathi had never encountered before in their subjects. They had a long history of skepticism, scientific method, and most importantly, experience with their own attempts at technological deception. The captain activated the ship's neural shielding, a standard protection against electromagnetic interference that happened to block the Kirathi's crude mental intrusion perfectly. The sudden silence in their minds seemed to confuse the Kirathi. Their ships flickered, the illusion wavering for just a moment before stabilizing. Riley ordered his crew to maintain defensive positions but avoid any aggressive actions. He activated the external communication array and spoke with calm authority that came from years of dealing with unknown situations. He identified himself and his ship, expressing humanity's desire for peaceful contact, while making no acknowledgement of the Kirathi's claimed divinity. High Priest Zelthar himself appeared as a hologram on the Pioneer's bridge, though the humans recognized it as an advanced projection rather than a divine manifestation. The Kirathi stood 3 meters tall, his body covered in the bioluminescent organisms that created patterns of light across his elongated form. 6 arms spread from his torso, each ending in delicate fingers that moved in hypnotic patterns designed to trigger submission responses in most carbon-based life forms. His head was triangular, with 3 eyes that seemed to see into the soul. Though human neurology was sufficiently different that the effect was merely unsettling rather than overwhelming. The High Priest spoke of humanity's fortune in encountering the divine presence of the Kirathi. He offered them a place in the eternal hierarchy, promising protection and enlightenment in exchange for worship and tribute. His words were accompanied by a display of power as one of the Kirathi ships fired what appeared to be a bolt of pure creation energy, forming a small asteroid from nothingness. The human sensors told a different story. The asteroid had been transported from elsewhere using a localized wormhole, made to appear as if it were spontaneously created. Dr. Foster worked frantically at her station, analyzing every aspect of the Kirathi's technology. Each supposed miracle had a scientific explanation, though admittedly the technology was impressively advanced. The gravitational lensing alone was centuries ahead of human capability, but it was still technology, not magic. She compiled her findings and transmitted them to Captain Riley's personal display. He reviewed the data while maintaining eye contact with the holographic High Priest, his expression carefully neutral. The conversation continued for an hour, with Zelthar growing increasingly frustrated by the humans' lack of appropriate awe. Other species would have been on their knees by now, building altars and composing hymns of worship. These humans simply stood there, asking questions about trade agreements and cultural exchange protocols. They spoke of the Kirathi as equals rather than gods, discussing technology and science rather than miracles and divine will. It was unprecedented and deeply disturbing to the High Priest. Finally, Zelthar's patience reached its limit. He issued an ultimatum that had worked on dozens of species before. The humans had 3 rotations of their planet to accept the divine truth of Kirathi superiority and begin construction of appropriate temples on their worlds. If they refused, they would face the wrath of the gods, a demonstration of power that would leave no doubt about the consequence of defiance. The hologram vanished, and the Kirathi ships disappeared in another theatrical display of apparent teleportation, though the Pioneer's sensors tracked their departure through hyperspace. Captain Riley stood in the sudden quiet of the bridge, his crew looking to him for guidance. They had 3 days to decide humanity's response to false gods who had enslaved dozens of species through technological trickery. The captain opened a secure channel to Earth, knowing that what came next would require more than just the Pioneer's diplomatic capabilities. If the Kirathi wanted to play gods, they were about to learn why humans had abandoned such pretenses centuries ago. The age of false deities was about to end, and humanity would be the one to pull back the curtain on the greatest deception in galactic history. The shattering of false gods. Earth's response came within 18 hours, faster than Captain Riley had anticipated. Admiral Catherine Storm, commanding officer of the 4th Fleet, arrived with a simple message. Humanity would not bow to false gods, and any attempt to force submission would be met with appropriate resistance. The UNS Defiant, humanity's most advanced warship, was already en route with a full diplomatic and scientific contingent. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would expose the Kirathi's deception not through violence, but through undeniable demonstration of the mundane nature of their supposed divinity. The Defiant was a masterpiece of human engineering, built not to impress but to function. Its hull was dark composite armor that absorbed rather than reflected energy, making it nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. No theatrical lights or impossible geometries decorated its form. It was a tool, refined and purposeful, carrying weapons that could crack moons and shields that could withstand stellar phenomena. More importantly, it carried humanity's most advanced sensors and analytical equipment, capable of dissecting any technology and displaying its workings in real time. Admiral Storm was a veteran of humanity's colonial conflicts, a woman who had seen enough violence to value peace, but understood that sometimes strength was the only language aggressors understood. She coordinated with Captain Riley, using the pioneers' gathered intelligence to formulate a response to the Karathi ultimatum. They would arrive at the designated coordinates with minutes to spare, not out of fear, but to demonstrate humanity's precise control over the situation. As the deadline approached, the Karathi assembled a fleet of 50 vessels around Axiom Prime, intending to make an example that would be broadcast across their empire. High Priest Zelthar had summoned representatives from 12 subject species to witness the humbling of these arrogant newcomers who dared to question divine authority. The viewing galleries of the sacred station were filled with various aliens, all conditioned through generations of servitude to believe in Karathi omnipotence. The human ships arrived exactly as the ultimatum expired, emerging from hyperspace with none of the theatrical flair the Karathi employed. The Defiant took position between the Pioneer and the Karathi fleet, its weapon systems powered but not targeted, a subtle message that humanity was prepared but not aggressive. Admiral Storm opened communications on all frequencies, ensuring that not just the Karathi but all their subject species would hear what came next. She spoke with the authority of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to reveal. She announced that humanity recognized the Karathi's advanced technology and applauded their achievements in gravitational manipulation and biological engineering. She listed each of their supposed miracles and provided detailed scientific explanations for how they were achieved. The asteroid creation was matter transportation. The shape-shifting ships were gravitational lensing. The telepathic communication was electromagnetic neural stimulation. Each divine power was reduced to its mechanical components, stripped of mystery and presented as impressive but ultimately mundane technology. Zelthar's response was predictable and violent. The Karathi fleet opened fire with their most powerful weapons, beams of energy that they claimed could unmake reality itself. In truth, they were advanced particle weapons, devastating against unshielded targets but well within humanity's defensive capabilities. The Defiant's shields flared to life, not as an invisible barrier but as a visible electromagnetic field that showed exactly how the energy was being dissipated and redirected. Every shot that struck the human vessel was analyzed, its composition broadcast to all observers, turning each attack into a lesson in applied physics. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 10 minutes. The Defiant's point defense systems intercepted Karathi missiles, its computers predicting their paths with mathematical precision rather than divine foresight. When Admiral Storm finally ordered return fire, it was with surgical precision. Each Karathi ship was disabled, not destroyed, their weapons and engines targeted with pinpoint accuracy that left life support and crew quarters intact. It was a demonstration of control that no god would need to exercise, the careful violence of a species that had mastered war and chosen restraint. The most devastating blow came not from weapons but from information. Dr. Foster and her team had cracked the Karathi's historical databases during the battle, discovering records of their discovery of the ancient technology they had built their empire upon. These documents, including video logs of early Karathi scientists admitting they did not fully understand the devices they were copying, were broadcast on all frequencies. The subject species watched as their gods were revealed to be frauds, seeing footage of Karathi technicians maintaining the machinery behind their miracles. High Priest Zelthar's final desperate act was to activate what he called the Omega Revelation, a massive holographic projection that would appear above every subject world simultaneously, showing the Karathi as beings of pure energy ascending to a higher plane of existence. It was meant to be their ultimate proof of divinity, a sight so overwhelming that no amount of scientific explanation could diminish its impact. But humanity had anticipated this as well. The Defiant deployed a swarm of reconnaissance drones, each equipped with quantum sensors that could detect and analyze any form of energy manipulation. As the Omega revelation began, the drones mapped every projector, every power source, every technological component involved in creating the illusion. They transmitted this data in real time, overlaying the Kirathi's divine light show with augmented reality displays showing the mundane machinery creating it. On every world, beside every false god ascending to heaven, appeared a technical schematic showing exactly how the trick was performed. The collapse of faith was audible even across the vacuum of space. On the sacred station, representatives of subject species began to stand, their years of conditioning breaking under the weight of undeniable evidence. Some wept for their lost faith, others raged at their deception, but all understood the fundamental truth that the humans had revealed. The Kirathi were not gods. They were simply aliens with better technology and fewer scruples about using it. Admiral Storm offered terms that were both merciful and transformative. The Kirathi Empire would be dissolved, its technology shared among all species for the advancement of peaceful purposes. The Kirathi themselves would not be punished for their deception, but would be required to make reparations to the species they had exploited. Humanity would help establish a new galactic council, where all species would have equal representation, regardless of their technological advancement. It was an offer of redemption rather than retribution. Some among the Kirathi fleet refused to accept this new reality. A faction of true believers, those who had begun to believe their own propaganda, attempted to rally their forces for a final divine crusade. They were met not by human weapons but by their own former subjects who had armed themselves with the knowledge humanity had provided. The revolution was swift and largely bloodless, as even the most devoted Kirathi servants could not maintain the illusion in the face of exposed machinery and revealed source code. High Priest Zelthar himself stood in his chamber of infinite sight, watching his empire crumble on countless screens. The tributes had stopped arriving, the prayers had turned to accusations, and the temples were being converted into schools and hospitals. He could have fought to the end, could have ordered his remaining loyalists to destroy rather than surrender. But something in the human admiral's words had reached him. They had not come as conquerors but as liberators, not to replace one set of gods with another but to free the galaxy from the need for gods at all. In the weeks that followed, humanity helped establish the Galactic Federation, a democratic body where technological advancement did not determine a species' worth or rights. The Kirathi's hoarded technology was studied and improved upon, leading to advances that benefited all member species. The former subject races learned to stand on their own, no longer requiring divine intervention to solve their problems. Some even showed remarkable innovation once freed from the mental constraints of worship. The Kirathi themselves underwent a cultural renaissance. Released from the burden of maintaining their divine facade, they could finally pursue genuine scientific advancement rather than merely maintaining ancient technologies they barely understood. Many became teachers, sharing their knowledge of gravitational manipulation and biological engineering with the same species they had once enslaved. It was a form of redemption that served the greater good while allowing them to maintain their dignity. Captain Riley stood on the observation deck of the Pioneer, watching as construction began on the first truly collaborative space station, built with technology and knowledge from 15 different species. Admiral Storm stood beside him, both understanding that this moment represented more than just the end of the Kirathi Empire. It was proof that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or technology, but its ability to see through deception and its courage to reveal truth, no matter how painful. The galaxy had learned an important lesson, one that humanity had learned through centuries of its own struggles. False gods could only maintain their power through ignorance and fear. Once the light of knowledge shone upon them, they were revealed as nothing more than ordinary beings hiding behind extraordinary lies. The age of manufactured deities was over, replaced by an age of cooperation, understanding, and genuine achievement. As news of the liberation spread to distant sectors, more species emerged from the shadows, having hidden from the Kirathi's influence for generations. They brought their own technologies, cultures, and perspectives to the growing Federation. The galaxy became richer not through divine decree but through diversity and mutual respect. It was a transformation that no false god could have achieved, for it required something the Kirathi had never possessed: the humility to admit that no one species, no matter how advanced, had the right to rule over others through deception. The story of humanity's stand against false gods became legend, but not in the way the Kirathi's divinity had been. It was remembered as history, documented and studied, a reminder that critical thinking and courage could overcome even the most elaborate deceptions. Children across the galaxy learned not to worship heroes but to understand their methods, not to fear the powerful, but to question their authority. It was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not freedom from gods, but freedom from the need for them.